Today's science books are filled with information, stuff that we know about the world around us and the universe beyond. But have you ever wondered how we know all this stuff? How do you know things about something as massive as the Big Bang, or as slow as the process of evolution, or as tiny as what we'll be looking at, the atom? Scientists know this information because they observe the world, and then they come up with explanations that explain what they've seen. They create models and test those models through experimentation. And then as new information comes to light, they revise their models and come up with new models. As we begin to look at the atom today, it's worth taking some time to explore this process of scientific inquiry. So what you'll need for this process is go get a piece of paper and a pencil, and also, while the video is playing, make sure you take the time to pause when I say pause and do the exercises that I say. Through this process, we'll learn to discover the unknown, essentially. So, as we get started, we'll need to go and get another prop. The prop we'll be using is this tube right here. Now, this mysterious tube has certain properties that we can see that are very obvious. It's white and plastic, and it has strings and rings and all sorts of things. But we're interested in what's going on in the inside where we can't see. So you're going to make some observations as we go here. Let's go ahead and start to play around with it a little bit. So I'm going to just go ahead and pull one of the rings and observe what happens. Okay? And we'll do the other ring. Okay? Turn it over and try again. All right, we'll pull, and we'll pull. Okay, so what you're going to do in just a second is pause the video, and I want you to write down the observations. What did you see as I made the moves here? Write them down, and then create a model of this tube. Now, your model should be as if you have X-ray vision and can see right through it. So account for the plastic, account for the tube, and then what would it look like on the inside so that you could get the action that I just did. Now, models are stand-ins for the real thing. You don't have the real tube. You don't know what's going on inside here. So you'll do a model to help represent that. Models can be anything from a list of ingredients to a 6-foot-tall DNA molecule. In this case, your model will be a drawing. And the drawing should represent what you saw, and you should be able to imagine that if you did what I did, you would get the same action based on your model. So go ahead and pause the video, draw your model, and when you're done, come back to us. Alright, so you've completed your model. At this point, you probably have something that looks relatively like this. I have my tube represented here, I have the strings going through the tube, and certainly it looks as if I pulled on this, that I would get that same action of the bottom ring coming up and same thing over here. Most people get to this point after seeing what they've seen. But now in science, as technology improves or as people just conduct different investigations, new information comes about. And that has happened here. So, let us observe again. Here's my tube. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull right here and notice what happened. And if I pull here, all of a sudden we have new information. I can take this one and notice what happened. The observations are important here. It is what you are going to base your new model on. So, if your model that you've drawn does not account for this new movement, like that, then go back, hit pause, and try to draw a new model that does. This takes creativity and it takes thought. So take your time. When you're ready, come on back, and we'll take a look at our model here again. Okay, so now you have a second model, and perhaps it explains this kind of motion. But again, new things can happen. Getting a little tangled. New things can happen over time, and we observe different things. For example, we could go a little further and see all kinds of different action that this tube is capable of. There's all sorts of things. Your model may or may not fit that. Now you may be wondering what is actually going on in this tube. The fact is, I'm not going to tell you. That's how science is. That's the nature of our world. There is no answer key for a lot of the things that we're investigating, for most of the things we're investigating. And so what we have to do is we make observations, we try to explain what we see, we set up models, we set up experiments to test those models, and you make the best of it. As more and more information is accumulated, we create theories that explain the world around us, and that is how we fill those science books. But for now, we're going to go and start to focus a little bit more specifically on the atom. For that, we're going to have to go outside. So, as was the case with the tube, over the years, scientists discovered quite a bit about the atom. They discovered that there were negative parts of it, which were eventually called electrons. They discovered there were positive parts called protons. They discovered there were neutral parts, just gaining mass, called neutrons. But the arrangement of the atom is a model that went through many different changes. A big breakthrough came at the hands of Niels Bohr. And in order to really understand that breakthrough, we're going to have to examine light just a little bit. So in just a second, as soon as these clouds pass, we're going to take a look at some of the properties of light via the sun. Alright, so what we're looking at here is an image of the sun through a sun spotter. We don't want to look directly at the sun. And it shows us the sun, and you can see some sunspots if you can look really closely. The camera doesn't pick that up so well. But what we're interested in is two specific properties of the sun. And we're going to use a couple props to see those. One, we'll just use this glass of water, and I've been working at this, and you can just make out a little bit of a rainbow. When we tilt it just right, the water acts as a prism and gets our white sunlight to break up into its colors. I can just make it out there. There's a little bit more, and you can see it there. So what that tells us is that there are different colors of light. What we talk about there is actually wavelengths of light. Light is a wave, and the different wavelengths appear as different colors. So that's one thing to take away from this. Now the next thing is, if I take a piece of ice out of my container here, my prop, and if I were to just set it on here, you can observe something about the ice, and it quickly, in this case, starts to melt. Now the light is shining down on the top here, but the table is hot, I will admit that. And it's hot because it's been absorbing all of the energy from the sun and heating up. And so the two things that you have now, one, sunlight is made up of different colors of light, different wavelengths, and two, that sunlight contains energy, which in this case we're seeing as heat energy that is melting the ice. Now we're going to make a little bit more of that, but for that we're going to have to go to a more traditional way of seeing some of this information.